I've generated over $150 million with paid advertising over the past 7 years. And so, over that time, having spent so much money and generated so many in return, I have a strategy that I'd like to share with you. It's pretty complex when you view it from this vantage point, but I'll go through each of the different layers and show you with logic, data, and experience why I've chosen to do things a certain way. And we're going to dive right into it. Let's take a look at understanding how Meta and TikTok work at a fundamental level. So, the first thing we need to understand is the business objective of these platforms. It's to keep users happy and engaged. Why? Because the more users that are active on Facebook, on TikTok, on Instagram, the more inventory that these companies can sell to advertisers. A user represents a piece of inventory that can be sold to. The more users, the more ads that can show up in feed, right? And so, if there are more advertisers and more users, the company makes more money. Which means that if there's more demand, more users, ad inventory is a lot cheaper. Supply and demand, simple economics, right? Which means your business can grow. And so, the simple formula that I've created, based on the business objective of these platforms, is to create better user experiences, which lower the cost for advertisers like you and I to run ads, which means that the company makes more money. And the cycle continues over and over again. And it's exactly how social media platforms have hooked all of us, either from a retention point of view as a consumer, viewing stuff on our phone, or as an advertiser, spending millions of dollars, right? And this formula has massively influenced my decision-making process when it comes to creative testing. So, we should test ads and set up our ad account in a way that is conducive to the business objectives of these platforms. If we do this, our CPMs, or blended cost per 1,000 impressions, will lower over time, giving us an edge against our competition, which means we can outbid our competition. Why? Because Meta treats our business as a benefit to their business objective. Conversely, if we ignore this and we don't operate our ad account and creative testing in a way that is conducive to their business objective, our CPMs go up, our costs go up, and our competition gets an edge over us. We need a systematic process to make sure that things get done the right way all the time. So that's how the algorithms work. So let's talk about the actual creative testing strategy, and we'll start over on the right-hand side. There are 3 budget optimization decisions that we need to make when we're about to set up a new creative testing campaign. We can choose ad set budget optimization, which is where we localize the budget at the ad set level. This is traditionally how things are done. We can choose campaign or Advantage Plus budget optimization, also known as CBO, where we set the budget at the campaign level and then the algorithm disperses among all of the active ad sets and chooses how much budget gets pushed to each ad set each day dynamically, depending on who the algorithm thinks will convert the best. And then, of course, we have Advantage Plus shopping campaigns, which is a mixture of CBO and ABO all in one, but rather than having ad sets, we have kind of an ASC CBO hybrid where we have different ads within the ASC, and then it functions like a CBO where the ASC campaign will choose the ads that get the most spend rather than the ad sets with CBO. Now, my personal preference is to use ABO, or ad set budget optimization, for creative testing. Why? Because we get to set up our creative tests in a controlled environment where it's really, really good at optimizing for creative learnings. CBO and ASC are excellent tools for extracting scale on a winning asset, but they're not very good for extracting creative learnings. And so, the controlled environment that ABO provides allows us to set a set daily budget for every creative test, choosing one audience, which means we limit the variables that we're testing at the same time. We have congruent ad settings. We leave tests online for an average amount of time, and we deliver the scheduling at the same time every single day. When we have all of these variables as a constant, as a control, we streamline the whole process, leaving the ads or the creatives as the only dependent variable, the only variable that we can realistically judge success on. It's either the ads didn't work or they did work, because all of these other settings are the same. Now, on the ad set level, there's a couple of important things to cover. Number one is the daily budget. And the truth is that there's no set daily budget recommendation that can universally apply across every single ad account, because it depends on a lot of different factors. Your average order value, your desired customer acquisition cost, how much or how many creatives you're testing, and how much you can afford to invest in creative testing while not generating a profit, right? And so there is a formula that I like to use for conversions or sales campaigns. And that's, you take your average order value divided by your target customer acquisition cost times 100. And if it lands on a really weird number, you just round it to the nearest fifth, right? Now, if you take this formula and you do this formula and you're like, oh my gosh, this is too much money for me to be spending on each ad set or each creative test. Okay, well, at a minimum, choose $50 per day. Anything less than that, and you're not going to be spending enough money each day to build a proper optimization process. In other words, you're not spending enough money, you're not letting the ads learn for long enough to be conclusive in whether or not you're actually seeing success or a failure from that ad set. Now, when it comes to scheduling, typically what happens is you upload an ad set, it goes through a review process, and your daily budget gets dispersed linearly throughout the day, meaning each hour of the 24-hour day, you have some ad spend getting pushed to each hour, even if it's not directly proportional, right? 1 a.m. in the Eastern Coast, if you're in the United States, is not going to get as much daily budget as 5 p.m., right? Basically, for the most part. Now, sometimes there's a glitch, unfortunately, which means that if you upload an ad and it gets out of approval at, let's say, 9 p.m. Eastern time, well, occasionally what happens, unfortunately, is that the entire daily budget that you set, let's say it's $500 a day, the ad set spends $500 a day in 3 hours. There's no way your performance is going to be as good if you spend all of your daily budget in 3 hours as opposed to linearly throughout a 24-hour cycle. And so the best thing that we can do in order to fix this is take action and take preventative measures, right? I recommend that we schedule every single creative test, every single ad set at 12:01 a.m. the following day. And so if you set up an ad at 8 in the morning, you schedule the ads to go live the following day at 12:01 a.m., which means you're never going to run into this glitch where the algorithm spends your money all within a very short period of time. Unless you like losing money. If you like losing money, then go for it. I don't think you do if you're watching this video. Next, we'll take a look at the audience. There's one king, broad targeting, which is where you leave everything open and there's no restrictions. There are a couple reasons why we choose broad targeting. You're allowed to reach the highest amount of qualified users at the lowest possible cost, because with audience testing, you're restricting the audience pool of users that can view your ad, which means your costs go up, not only because custom audiences cost more on a CPM basis blended across the whole account, but also because you're degrading the user experience. When you force your ads to be shown to an interest group or a lookalike, you're basically forcing frequency to go up, or the average amount of time, or the average amount of times a user is going to see your ad each day. Not everybody within that interest group is qualified, and even the ones that are qualified, not all of those people are going to be interested in whatever you're selling. But you're forcing spend to go towards those users, which decreases the user experience, which increases your CPMs, not just on that ad set, but across the whole account, because your advertiser score goes down. All that to say, you also maximize your scaling potential, because when you have a winning creative, you don't have to worry about audience fatigue. With broad targeting, you have the whole country to find potential profitable users for. And yes, the algorithm is smarter than you and I. The algorithm can find a better audience than you or I could select at the ad set level. Not to mention the technology is very outdated and is getting removed with each passing year. Why? Because it's outdated and broad is better. Okay. On the ad level, we have 3 options. We can choose standard ad uploads, dynamic creative, or smart creative, with TikTok specifically. We'll get to that in a second. Standard ads are the traditional way you upload ads, individually, post IDs, right? And you have separate post IDs that you can analyze individually for each test, but also across the entire account. Dynamic creative is a little bit different. Instead of having individual post IDs, you have one ad unit that contains all your ad creative and all of your ad copy variations. And then dynamic creative combines the best variations of creative and copy and call to actions and shows those to users. But we avoid dynamic creative or flex ads now because the tech is outdated and Meta refuses to update it. There are a lot of reporting features that don't work anymore. In fact, flex ads doesn't even let you break down by individual ad creative which ones are doing best. So when it comes to optimizing the account for creative learnings, dynamic creative is terrible at that. It can still be used for ad copy testing, and I do use it occasionally for that, but for creative testing generally across the board, standard ads are the best. I used to recommend dynamic creative a couple years ago. I don't anymore because they refuse to update it. And so, when it comes to splitting on the different platforms, standard ads for Meta, and then TikTok using smart creatives. And we'll talk about that here. So, it's basically the same thing. TikTok wanted to copy dynamic creatives from Meta, but it actually updates its technology. And so it's a lot better for performance marketing to use smart creatives, which again pools ad copy and creative variations together in one ad unit, which can share learnings with each other as opposed to separate post IDs. Okay? Now, how long do we leave tests online? Again, it depends on several factors, but there are a few constant variables that can help us make a decision. Because remember, metrics like return on ad spend, cost per acquisition, or cost per lead cannot be predicted on a day-to-day level. Some days you're going to have better performance, some days you're going to have worse performance. It's just how it is. So we have to expand the time horizon that we're looking at data from. So we have to, rather than taking a look at data from yesterday, we have to take a look at data from the past 3 days or the past 7 days. And so when it comes to creative testing, nothing changes. We have to leave stuff online for a minimum of 4 to 7 days. Why? Because that reduces volatility. Maybe the ads are doing really well, but you just had 1 or 2 days where they didn't do well. Maybe they're awesome ads and they would have printed your business money, but because you cut them too early, you never got to see the light of the day. And so if you're facing budget constraints, typically last 7 days for each creative test. If you don't have budget constraints and you're using the formula that I showed you earlier, 4 to 7 days is what I recommend. And if you have a really high average order value, let's say you have a $300 AOV, and you're only spending $50 a day, well, you're going to have to leave it a lot longer than just 7 days. And I know that sounds like a lot of money, but it is what it is. You got to spend the money to get the data to figure it out. And that, my friends, is my $150 million creative testing strategy for Meta and TikTok. Leave a comment if you have any. I'm happy to respond to each and every single one. And I wish you all the best of luck with your Facebook and TikTok ads. Cheers.